All right, hi, I'm Nathaniel Maier, and I'm going to talk about the exciting topic of passwords. So this is a defensive-oriented talk. I am a cybersecurity analyst at First Energy in Akron, and I actually work in the hands-off security team. We do security policy, procedure writing, do a lot of consulting with users, and apparently my presentation died. Try that again. Okay. So a lot of consulting, auditing systems, performing assessments, internal and external coordination of those assessments, and a lot of compliance work, honestly, with NERC-CIP, Sarbanes-Oxley, a lot of that type of stuff. It's not uncommon for our group to bring in technology and then eventually hand it over to another team. Large part of my job in the last 2 to 3 years has been around a password management solution. This was brought in, good business case approved to replace a bad solution. At our company, the bad solution was a Lotus Notes database. So I'll get into this, but basically we needed a place to store the thousands upon thousands of shared service account passwords. Since we're a pretty large company, mainly privileged access we were concerned about, but for example, the local root account or administrator account on your servers, obviously a lot of our sysadmins needed access to those passwords to do things either as part of their daily job or access to that in a DR or emergency situation. And really this turned into a ongoing project to make password changes better for the owners of these accounts and almost make it transparent to them. So I had a subtitle that these are controls your users won't hate, and shocker, most users still don't like passwords, and even our sysadmins who have to live with tons of passwords don't like them. So passwords suck, and here most of us have seen this around the internet for a while. These are the top 500 passwords from a number of recent data breaches and in a word cloud. So these are bad passwords, pretty much everyone on here, but they're the most common ones for every user. Really, I think people have done research on do IT users, sysadmins, pick better passwords, and the answer is no. So part of this solution that I implemented, where possible, it doesn't let the user pick the password. So obviously, you have individual accounts that the users have to be able to pick their own passwords, set those, and only they know them. But for these shared service account passwords, that's where possible, we want to automate that and take the user out of the equation so they can't pick things that are equally bad, even if there are more strict complexity or length requirements on the password. So yes, passwords suck. Everyone will agree pretty much. Users hate passwords because they have to remember them. Sysadmins hate passwords because they have way too many that they have to remember, and they might only use one once a year or less. And attackers love default passwords. I mean, the first thing I do on our internal assessments is figure out what the default password is and try that. And even though we have policy saying you shall not use default passwords, a lot of times that works on a new implementation. And beyond that, attackers love simple or identical passwords. So I'll leave that to people like Dave Kennedy and his password cracking rig. But once an attacker actually figures out what your password is, a lot of companies implement the same password. It might be a strong, complex password, but the same password on every server or every workstation. And that just makes sense for how you get it out there originally. And don't get me wrong, changing a password once to a strong, complex password is well worth it. And even if it is the same, but then say you need to give one person the password for this one workstation. You've just now given them the password for every workstation in your environment. So we don't like that in InfoSec. We hate these bad passwords, and XKCD pointed out pretty well. We've probably seen this one that talks about the crypto nerd's way to get a password versus what would actually happen. So beyond passwords just generally sucking, changing passwords sucks even more. So just when a user gets used to the last one, you tell them they have to change it again. And so what do our users do? They just put a 1 or a 2 or a 3 at the end. And maybe some of our systems disallow that, so they move to putting that at the beginning or the month at the end. There's always a way around the system. Sysadmins hate changing passwords for a lot of reasons. They have tons of accounts, tons of these shared accounts, so maybe they'll end up as the same on every system. Bad security there. If a user only needs, or a sysadmin only needs a password for one system, now they have them for all systems, and you have no record of who was using that account. Beyond that, for service accounts, those are accounts that you have to maybe use within scripts or processes for an application to communicate with the domain or another system or a database. Every time you change those passwords, you have to go in and update those scripts. So that's a maintenance nightmare, and at least from my experience, documentation is key, and it's not always there. It leaves a lot to be desired. Basically, it's not uncommon for our users who have not really adhered to our policy as stringently as they should to not know where a service account password is even used. So we might tell them you have to change this, and they could change it, but it's going to break 50 applications that happen to use that account. So just finding out where all those are used is a challenge. Attackers hate changing change passwords too, because hey, they just got their foot in your environment. They got a shell, and now you if they haven't persisted that access, now you have to phish that user again, get your privileged access yet again. InfoSec, on the policy side, we love requiring passwords to change, and hey, it's the policy, live with it, right? But it's not quite that easy when you have beyond a few hundred accounts, really. It's something always will go wrong with the password change. So why do we require change anyway? A lot of reasons, but auditability for InfoSec is a key one. We want to be able to tell for shared and service accounts who used it or what used it. Why was this account logged in to this system? So I've mentioned the 3 types of accounts, but real quick, really every single account should fall in one of these 3 categories. Individual accounts, what most users log on to their systems with every day. That's a user ID, username tied to that one user and one user only. He or she shouldn't be sharing it with anyone else. Shared accounts are expected to be used by 2 or more users, or at least be accessible to them. That almost every system has a shared account, like a root account or administrator account, renamed hopefully. And then service accounts are used for a system to authenticate to another system, so an application to authenticate to a database, something like that. This gets really messy fast because really InfoSec prefers to have every account be one and only one of these 3 types of accounts, but that doesn't always happen. So you might have an individual who needs to play with a new piece of software technology, and he doesn't want to go to the work to have a new service account created, so he just puts his own credentials in there. 6 months down the road, it's going into production with that individual's password, and he goes and changes it, and now that application breaks. So you could have an individual or a combination individual service account, or you could have a shared account that gets combined with a service account and have the same problem that shared account should really only be used by for interactive logon to a system and not as a service account, but and vice versa, really. Service accounts shouldn't be allowed interactive access to any systems. Should just be allowed application level access. So no simple solution here, but other than documentation and training, but it gets complicated and muddy. And then really privileged versus non-privileged accounts and the level of privilege. So it's really a one-size-fits-none situation. Most of our quote-unquote unprivileged accounts have some privileged access to the environment. Now, that might not be administrator access to a workstation or server, but it's access to some, say, payroll system, payroll spreadsheet. And when we get into shared and service accounts, almost every shared account that needs to exist in your environment probably has some level of privilege. But there are so many different levels in this continuum, and it's everything from sysadmin down to power users, or at least users who think they need extra powers, to the people who are phishable and shouldn't have any extra access more than the janitor on your network, maybe no user account, but for some reason they have some type of password. And those phishables get scary because if they get their password, they're the ones who can infiltrate into your environment and or have that attacker allowed or get escalated access. And then application access or actions. Really, what access does a service account really need? It's frequently requested that, hey, our documentation says this new service account needs admin access to all these servers. Well, does it really need that access, really, or does it only need access to push a file to this one file share? Stuff like that. So fix it. That's what our management says. Just change the passwords, get rid of all the passwords. If passwords are a problem, figure out some other solution. And we can tell them, get rid of passwords, get rid of all these excess accounts as much as you need, but there are definitely legitimate reasons that a lot of these shared service accounts need to exist. Mostly for a key reason in a DR or emergency situation, at the end of the day, almost every system has a built-in shared account, and that's how you set up the system initially. And even if some systems allow you to disable that, there's got to be some way to get back in and reset it in an emergency. So really, these built-in accounts, even if they could be disabled, there's some recovery procedure, and it almost makes you think backdoor if you don't see that document anywhere, because the vendor's got to have some way, even if it's not fun. So the real fix is try to make this transparent. Don't worry about passwords changes as much, and don't make that something that the sysadmins have to think of several times a year. So there are a number of commercial and open source ways to implement this, or you can write your own solution. This can get very costly very quickly, or you can use some of the PowerShell type stuff or Unix, Linux scripting that was talked about previously. It's kind of whatever fits your business, whatever fits your environment. But the important thing is have some way to change passwords that the sysadmins will like more than manually touching each server. I mean, a lot of them write their own scripts and should be used to this type of thing. But have some way to automate it. And, I was looking at great graphics I could add to this, and I always hate gear images like this because you can't turn those. But that's kind of how automation goes at First Energy sometimes, because you say, oh, this is automation, and you try to turn it and it doesn't automate like it should. So it's bad and good at the same time there. But automation is relatively easy for shared accounts, which really meet the definition of shared accounts and aren't used as service accounts. Shared accounts, as long as we implemented a commercial off-the-shelf product, and as long as we trained our users and said all your shared and service accounts must be in this password management solution, they got used to that eventually. Then the next step is for shared accounts, we could get their buy-in to start changing these passwords using that solution. obviously, if users don't go to our password management solution to get the new password, they're going to have an old password that doesn't work. So getting them trained to know they always need to go into it and don't bother writing it down because it's going to change soon after you get that password. It's just buy-in period. So, and it's really dependent on good documentation for doing the same thing with server's account. So there's some advanced functionality of this type of software that can change the password. Say it's an Active Directory account that's used in a XML file, web config file in IIS or something like that. You can have the password changed in Active Directory and then push that updated password to the web config file, but only if you know it's there. So people might say, oh, this is just a shared account. It's not a service account, but it turns out it actually is. It's used for XYZ application. That knowing that up front is half the battle. And really, beyond this, once we automate it, allow access and allow the sysadmins or users to get to these passwords or use the passwords, use the accounts without thinking about it. So there's a number of ways you can do this, but it basically could launch like a PuTTY window or an RDP window and log in as this account without the user ever seeing the password. So it could be a 30, 40 character password. They never have to type a key. It's kind of magic, but it's also awesome. And once you get this set up, the users see more buy-in or more value out of it. So results at First Energy, this really always was a password or a policy requirement in our written security policies to vault your shared service account passwords. So that was even under the old Lotus Notes bad solution. This new solution made it a lot easier and added this additional functionality. So there are a number of things that can provide. It can actually be an early warning system. So if the password that the solution knows about for an account is incorrect, it can validate it, say, once per week, once every month, to check, is this password correct? If this account was needed right now, would it work? And if it's not, hey, that can be alerted on. Create a ticket or something. It can also then automate the password change, and then it could actually reset the password for either initial deployments or when that verification fails. So if you try once a week to validate that the password is correct, and last Friday was fine, but this Friday it failed, right after it fails, you could have the solution log in with a different account and reset it. So that's pretty easy to set up for things like Windows or Active Directory accounts, and with the right type of integration, it could be implemented for other type of accounts. So shared accounts is where we've concentrated primarily so far on our efforts to bulk change a lot of passwords. Return on investment is pretty easy to see, because before we might have had one password value for 2,500 accounts on 2,500 different servers, so the local admin account on those servers. And after this, after a few hours of finally implementing this after training users and getting their buy-in, that's one account per server, 2,500 servers. That means 25 new strong passwords that change after every use. So, and these could be however long you want, because the users don't see them and they don't have to type them in to change them, nothing like that. So, and once this is in place, the users, sysadmins like this, or at least they hate it less. Definitely lessons learned from this project. This can go on as long as you want it to be, and in large environments, new systems are put in all the time. So it's also takes having the support and sponsorship from your executives to get something like this in and get attention to this problem. This is a lot about project management. We purchased our solution a good 6 months before it actually went into production use, and a lot of that was just working through all the soft skills and running this by different groups and getting their buy-in and having different Active Directory groups set up the right way. But this is not something you can put in a week and have it not break everything in your environment. But it really depends on prioritization and timeline there. Then I think I mentioned earlier about the key to have good documentation from the teams who own these shared service accounts. That's been one of the biggest problems, is people think they know how their accounts are used and they really don't. So because an account was around for 10 years and it had the access it needed, it got kind of passed around and used in a lot of different situations. When they now go try to change that password, they don't know all the places where it was used, so they don't know all the things that are going to need to be updated. So inevitably things kind of break. User training is important and retraining is important. People change departments and change the level of involvement they need or expertise they need to know about this password management solution. So having a group there able to train them on what it's supposed to do, how do they use it, where do they go if they have questions, that's important going forward. And no surprise, but users still won't like it, but they'll like it less once it's automated, and they might actually like some of the features about knowing about problems before they're there. We definitely had some issues before this solution was in place where a server went down or it lost its connection to the AD domain, and the way you usually get in is by logging in with the local account and rejoining it to the domain. Well, if you don't know the password for that local account, that sysadmin can't get in. So recognizing those problems and enabling that verification and reset functionality really helped that team. And beyond that, find advocates not only in executive sponsorship, but also at lower levels, kind of advocates within IT and within other teams that own these shared service accounts. That's really pushed this to be implemented for some teams before others, since this is a timely type of thing that takes some time to implement for any environment. And that's all I had. So any questions? No questions? Oh, yeah.
So like what technology or tool do you use to automate the password process to make it easier and more transparent for your users?
So ours is a very large. I'm trying not to actually say the product because I don't want to give them business or anything. I mean, we're very happy with it, but it's a Gartner. If you have access to Gartner or something, it's a top leader. For any large companies, I definitely suggest going the commercial route. If you only have a few hundred accounts or a few hundred servers, you could probably get away with a PowerShell script or Linux script. But yeah, the commercial off-the-shelf product we have allows you, once you're managing the password, or well, even if you're not automating the password change type stuff, it allows you to click a connect button to open PuTTY or remote desktop and connect with that account. So. Yeah, it's one kind of password solution for all those accounts, and it really could be used for individual accounts as well, but any account is just really a username and password at the end of the day. So there's nothing that says you can't put certain types of accounts, but our focus was definitely on shared service and privileged accounts. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks for the organizers.